All right, so today we're diving deep into effective communication, and wow, you guys did not pick an easy one. This is Professor Dalton Coe from York University.
Yeah?
This is a stack of his lectures.
Hmm.
And not only has he been teaching for over 40 years,
Yeah.
he's also a top communications scholar, A&D, and organizational change practitioner.
So he's not just like an academic.
Right.
He's actually out there helping organizations communicate better.
And apparently he's known as one of the best teachers in all of Ontario.
Impressive. So what does he have to say? What are some of his key insights?
Well, he starts off with this great story about visiting his wife's family in Italy and just feeling completely mute.
Oh, I can relate to that. I remember when I first traveled to
Right. Like you can't speak the language
yeah.
and you realize how much we rely on all these shared patterns in communication that we don't even realize are there.
It's like we're all driving on autopilot, assuming everyone knows the rules of the road.
Right.
But then you hit a detour
Yeah.
and suddenly you're lost. Same with communication. Those unspoken rules, those subtle cues we pick up on without even thinking, they're essential for smooth sailing.
Yeah.
But when those cues are missing, or we're dealing with someone who has a different set of rules,
Right.
that's when things get complicated.
It's like you think, oh, communication is simple when you're talking to your best friend, but then you have to explain something complex to a coworker.
Or you have a disagreement with your partner.
Right. Right.
Suddenly you're hitting those detours left and right.
Exactly.
And that's when we start to see the limitations of just focusing on the words themselves. That old saying, it's not what you say, but how you say it.
Right. Right.
Professor Coex actually brings up Albert Mehrabian's research, which shows that only 7% of communication is about the actual words we use.
Oh, wow. I've heard of this.
38% is tone of voice.
Oh, okay.
And a whopping 55% is all about body language, facial expressions.
That explains so much about text messages.
Yeah.
You miss out on all those crucial nonverbal cues, so it's so easy to misinterpret tone and intention.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever had like a text message blow up in your face? That's Mehrabian's rule in action.
That's a great way to put it. And it gets even more fascinating. Professor Coe talks about how we're actually sending and receiving messages on two levels at the same time.
Okay.
You've got the content level, which is the literal meaning of the words.
Right.
But then there's the relationship level, which is all about how those words are being said and what they convey about our connection with the other person.
Oh, so like I could be giving someone advice with like the best intentions,
Yeah,
but if my tone of voice is patronizing, they're going to feel talked down to.
precisely.
It's not what I said, it's how I said it.
Exactly. And this is happening all the time beneath the surface.
Wow.
No wonder communication can be so tricky.
Yeah.
There's this whole other conversation going on that we're not always aware of.
Right.
And to understand that other conversation,
Right.
we need to understand how our minds work.
Yeah.
Especially that part Professor Coe calls the cognitive unconscious.
Okay, so this is where things get really mind-blowing for me.
It is pretty amazing.
He describes the cognitive unconscious as this powerhouse in our brains
Okay.
that processes information at an incredible speed, like way faster than our conscious mind.
Like way, way faster
We're talking 11 million bits per second.
versus the measly 40 bits our conscious mind can handle.
Yeah, it's like comparing a supercomputer to an abacus.
It's a great analogy.
And this supercomputer is constantly running in the background, right?
Right.
It's influencing how we see the world, how we interpret information, and how we communicate.
And it relies on these deeply ingrained patterns called schemas,
Schemas, okay.
which we develop from our earliest experiences and cultural influences.
Okay.
They're like mental shortcuts that help us navigate the world. But sometimes those shortcuts lead us astray.
Oh, I see. Like a...
He gives this great example, an experiment with red and blue decks of cards.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of this.
People started showing signs of stress when choosing from the bad deck, long before they could articulate why.
Like their body knew before their mind did.
Exactly. Their bodies were reacting to the pattern before their conscious minds even caught up.
It's like a gut feeling, but like on a much deeper level.
It's a fantastic example of how much of our communication is driven by forces beneath our conscious awareness.
Right.
We're not always in control of our reactions and choices as we think we are.
So we've got this incredibly fast pattern-seeking part of our brain that's kind of running the show behind the scenes.
Right.
But then on top of that, we bring our own unique self into every interaction.
That's a crucial point. Professor Coe emphasizes that each of us has this unique blend of personality, self-concept, and self-esteem that acts as a filter for how we communicate and interpret the communication of others.
It's like everyone's wearing a different pair of glasses.
I like that.
That colors how they see the world and interact with it.
And that's why understanding the self is so crucial for effective communication.
Think about it. Have you ever been extra sensitive to criticism on a particular day?
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe you were more quick to anger than usual?
Yeah, absolutely.
Professor Coe would say that your self-esteem was likely playing a role, shaping your perception and reaction to the situation.
So it's not just about the words themselves.
Right.
It's about this whole filter of you that those words are passing through.
Exactly.
But if we're all walking around with these vulnerable selves, how do we protect ourselves in the process of communication? How do we make sure ourselves don't get trampled on?
That's where the concept of conversational face comes in. It's about how we present ourselves in interactions to maintain our self-esteem and project a desired image. We're all trying to put our best foot forward, to be seen in a positive light.
Yeah.
And when that face is threatened, that's when things get really interesting.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What happens when our conversational face is threatened? Well, that's when the defenses come up. We might deny responsibility, avoid the conversation, or even lash out at the other person.
Oh, yeah. It's like our ego is going into protection mode. But that's got to be for next time.
We'll pick it up there next time on the deep dive.
It's so relatable, though, right? Like, think about the last time someone questioned your judgment or told you you were wrong about something.
Oh, yeah.
You felt that little surge of defensiveness, that urge to push back, to protect your image.
It's a natural human reaction, but the problem is those...
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He advocates for a model he calls mindful communication,
Okay.
which is built on two key principles,
Right.
mindfulness and appreciation.
Oh, I knew you were going to say mindfulness.
I know it sounds a little touchy-feely, but bear with me.
Okay.
There's real power in this approach.
Okay, so mindfulness is a pretty popular concept these days.
Yeah.
But how does it apply specifically to communication?
Right.
It's not like we're all going to, sit around meditating before we have a conversation.
No, not exactly.
Okay.
In this context, mindfulness is about cultivating a heightened awareness of our internal state,
Okay.
our thoughts, feelings, and even our physical sensations,
Yeah.
as well as paying attention to the context of the interaction.
Mm-hmm.
It's about being present in the moment,
Okay.
but also present with ourselves.
So it's about tuning into that inner chatter,
Right.
that constant stream of thoughts and judgments that's always running in the background.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we have to be aware of the situation itself, the dynamics at play, the unspoken rules of the game.
Yep. All of it.
It's a lot to juggle.
It is, and that's why it takes practice.
Yeah.
But the more we can cultivate this awareness,
Okay.
the more space we create for conscious choices in how we communicate.
Okay.
Instead of reacting automatically, we can choose to respond in a way that's more aligned with our values and goals.
Okay, and how does appreciation fit into this model?
Right.
It sounds a little vague.
Yeah.
Does it mean we have to agree with everything the other person says?
Not at all.
Okay.
Appreciation in this sense is about shifting our focus from judgment and evaluation
Okay.
to understanding and empathy.
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing the inherent worth and value of the other person.
Right.
Even if we don't agree with their views or their behavior,
Yeah.
we're not trying to win the conversation.
Right.
We're trying to connect on a human level.
So it's like putting down our weapons, lowering our defenses, approaching the conversation with a genuine curiosity to understand the other person's perspective.
Exactly.
Easier said than done, especially in the heat of the moment.
Absolutely. It's a skill that takes practice,
Yeah.
like learning a new language.
Right.
But Professor Coe offers some practical strategies to make it easier.
Okay.
One of his key recommendations is to speak descriptively rather than judgmentally.
So instead of saying, "You're always late," which is like throwing a grenade into the conversation,
Yeah,
I could say, "I noticed you arrived at 8:30 when we agreed to meet at 8:00.
much better.
It's still addressing the issue,
Right.
but in a way that's less likely to trigger defensiveness.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a subtle shift, but it can make a world of difference.
Right.
By focusing on the observable behavior, you avoid making assumptions about the other person's intentions or character.
Okay.
You're sticking to the facts and allowing space for the other person to explain their perspective.
And I imagine this ties into another one of Professor Coe's suggestions, which is to speak from a place of equality rather than superiority.
It's about acknowledging that we're both human beings with valid experiences and perspectives,
Yeah.
even if we see things differently.
So it's about creating a level playing field.
In the conversation.
Right.
Okay.
That means treating the other person with respect,
Right.
acknowledging their expertise and experience,
Yeah.
and avoiding language that positions us as the expert or the authority figure.
Which can be tough, especially in situations where there's a power imbalance.
Sure.
Like between a boss and an employee.
Yeah.
Or a parent and a child.
Yeah. It's tempting to use your position to control the conversation,
Right.
but ultimately that undermines trust and connection.
Professor Koh's point is that even in those situations where we do hold a position of authority,
Yeah.
we can still choose to communicate in a way that fosters open dialogue
Yes.
and mutual understanding.
It's about setting aside the ego and focusing on creating a space where everyone feels safe
Yeah.
to share their thoughts and feelings. So it's not about being a pushover or avoiding conflict altogether.
No.
It's about approaching conflict in a way that strengthens relationships rather than tearing them down.
Exactly.
It's about choosing collaboration over control.
And that brings us to Professor Koh's model of 3 types of talk,
Yes.
which I think beautifully captures these different approaches to communication.
Okay, let's break them down.
Sorry.
Connect talk seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's the kind of talk we use to build and maintain relationships, right?
That's it.
It's about sharing experiences, emotions, creating a sense of shared reality.
Think about those casual conversations with friends, family, colleagues.
Right.
You're not necessarily trying to solve problems or make decisions.
Yeah.
You're simply connecting on a human level.
Right. We're just shooting the breeze.
Exactly. Laughing, sharing stories, empathizing, just enjoying each other's company.
It's the kind of talk that makes us feel seen and heard and understood.
It's the glue that holds our relationships together.
I like that, the glue.
And Professor Koh points out that connect talk often relies as much on nonverbal cues as on the words themselves.
Right.
Think about the importance of eye contact, facial expressions, tone of voice in conveying empathy,
Right.
warmth, and engagement.
Yeah.
Sometimes a simple smile or a knowing look can speak volumes.
It's like that unspoken language of connection that transcends words.
Exactly.
But what about when we do need to solve problems or
Right.
make decisions?
That's where control talk comes in.
Okay.
Control talk is often our default mode when we're trying to get things done.
Yeah.
Or convince someone to see things our way.
Right.
It's about using logic reasoning or even emotional appeals to influence the other person's behavior or perspective.
Okay, this is where things can get a little tricky though, right?
Yes,
Because it's so easy for control talk to slip into contest talk,
it is.
where we're more focused on winning the argument
Uh-huh.
than actually finding a solution
Right.
that works for everyone.
It's like playing a game of tug of war, trying to pull the other person over to our side.
And that's when communication breaks down.
Right.
You know, control talk might be effective in the short term,
Maybe.
but in the long run, it can damage relationships.
It can create resentment, defensiveness,
Uh-huh.
a sense of being unheard or disrespected.
So how do we break free from this control talk trap?
That's the million-dollar question.
Professor Koh suggests dialogue talk,
It does.
which he describes as like the sweet spot of effective communication,
It's the holy grail.
where we can solve problems and strengthen our relationships at the same time.
Yes.
But how do we get there?
Right.
I feel like most conversations end up being more about control than dialogue.
It's definitely a skill that takes practice, but it's worth the effort.
Okay.
Dialogue talk is a unique blend of problem solving and connection.
Okay.
It's about engaging in a conversation where both parties feel heard,
Mm-hmm.
respected, and empowered to contribute to finding a solution.
It sounds like a delicate dance.
It is.
How do we make it work in real life? I mean, we're all busy people.
Yeah.
We don't have endless hours to sit around having these deep, meaningful conversations.
You're right. It's not always easy.
Hmm.
And it doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out process.
Yeah.
Dialogue talk requires us to be present,
Yeah.
to listen deeply,
Mm-hmm.
to ask clarifying questions,
Okay.
and to be willing to compromise.
Right.
It's about setting aside our egos and genuinely trying to understand the other person's perspective.
It sounds like dialogue talk requires a high level of mindfulness and appreciation.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's about letting go of our need to be right, to control the conversation,
Yeah.
and to impose our solutions on the other person.
So it's about creating a space
Right.
for genuine collaboration
Yes.
and co-creation,
Exactly.
where everyone feels valued and respected.
It's beautiful when it happens.
But how do we do that when we're under pressure, when emotions are running high,
Right.
when we feel like our needs aren't being met?
That's where the real challenge lies.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. We understand those hidden dynamics in our conversations. the power of mindfulness and appreciation, and the differences between connect, control, and dialogue talk. But how do we actually put all of this into practice? Like when the pressure's on, when we're in the middle of a disagreement and our emotions are running high, it's easy to forget all about mindful communication.
You're absolutely right. That's where the real work begins.
Yeah.
It's like learning to play a musical instrument. You can read all the books, watch all the tutorials,
Right.
but until you actually pick up the instrument and start practicing, you're not going to make much progress. And even then, there will be times when you hit a sour note.
So how do we get better at hitting those right notes in our communication? How do we shift from control talk to dialogue talk when we're feeling stressed, triggered, or just plain frustrated?
Professor Coe offers a really helpful tip here.
Okay.
He says one of the most powerful things we can do is to ask why, both to ourselves and to the other person.
Right.
Not in an accusatory way,
Yeah.
but in a genuinely curious way.
So instead of saying, why are you always so late?
Yeah, which sounds like an attack.
Right.
You could say, I'm curious, what happened that made you late today? It's about trying to understand the other person's perspective, their reasons, their motivations.
So we're trying to understand like their side of the story.
Exactly.
Not just coming with our assumptions.
Right, by asking why. We're inviting the other person to share their experience, their thought process, the factors that are influencing their behavior. It's a way of stepping outside our own assumptions and judgments, creating space for empathy and understanding.
It's like we're putting on those different pairs of glasses we talked about earlier, trying to see the world through the other person's eyes.
Exactly.
And maybe we'll discover that what we perceived as a deliberate attack or a personal slight was actually something totally different.
Right, and even if we don't completely understand or agree with the other person's perspective, the simple act of asking why can de-escalate the situation. Open the door to a more productive conversation.
Right.
It shows that we're genuinely interested in understanding, not just in being right.
Which is so hard sometimes.
It is.
Professor Coe actually challenges us to reflect on a recent conversation where we were more focused on being right than on understanding the other person. Kind of a gut check, but I think it's so important.
It's so easy to fall into that trap, especially when our egos are involved. But when we prioritize being right over understanding, we close ourselves off to the possibility of connection and growth.
So how do we shift out of that mindset? How do we start prioritizing understanding over being right? It seems like a pretty radical shift in perspective.
It does, but it's possible. Professor Coe suggests starting small.
Okay.
By noticing our automatic reactions, especially in those moments when we feel triggered or defensive. What are the thoughts that are running through our heads? What are the physical sensations we're experiencing? What's our impulse?
So it's like hitting the pause button on our autopilot mode.
Yeah.
Choosing a more conscious response. Instead of reacting automatically, we take a breath.
Yeah.
We observe our internal state and we ask ourselves what's really going on here. What's the most helpful way to respond?
Exactly. That pause, even if it's just for a few seconds, can make a world of difference.
Yeah.
It gives us the space to choose dialogue talk over control talk, to ask why instead of making assumptions, and to approach the conversation with a spirit of curiosity rather than judgment.
Professor Coe also encourages us to practice using descriptive language rather than evaluative language.
Right, it's about focusing on the facts, on what we observe, rather than on our interpretations or judgments.
So instead of saying you're being disrespectful, which is a judgment,
right,
you could say, when you interrupt me, it makes me feel like my thoughts aren't valued.
Much better.
We're owning our experience without blaming the other person. It's like we're painting a picture with words rather than throwing darts. We're sharing our perspective in a way that invites understanding rather than defensiveness.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that dialogue talk isn't about being passive or avoiding conflict.
You're right. It's not about suppressing our own views or needs. It's about expressing them in a way that invites dialogue rather than defensiveness.
Right.
It's about being assertive without being aggressive.
It's a delicate balance, but when we can find that balance, when we can engage in dialogue talk effectively, the rewards are immense.
They are.
We build stronger relationships, we solve problems more creatively, and we create a more positive and productive communication environment.
Professor Konkin reminds us that effective communication is a skill. And like any skill, it takes practice and dedication to master.
Yeah.
There will be times when we stumble, when we fall back into old patterns, when we say the wrong thing.
Right.
But the key is to be patient with ourselves, to learn from our mistakes, and to keep practicing.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Well said.
And by embracing these principles of mindfulness, appreciation, and dialogue, we can transform our communication from a source of stress and conflict into a powerful tool for connection, understanding, and growth.
And remember, you're not alone in this journey. We all struggle with communication at times. But by being aware of the dynamics at play, by practicing these skills, and by approaching our conversations with a willingness to learn and grow, we can all become more effective communicators.
So the next time you're facing a challenging conversation, remember to take a breath, calm your inner chatter, and try speaking from a place of mindfulness and appreciation. You might be surprised at the difference it makes. Thanks for diving deep with us today, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.